Yeah, look, it's frustrating as I look back on what I had. In effect, I had a business that entertained 20,000 people every week in events.
Yeah.
Reached 100 million people weekly through
That's
our online platforms.
That's like population of. Oh, I can't say. I think of a country that has a population. That's just a huge number of people.
Huge.
100 million a week.
And
Welcome back to Monks in the Trunk. Today we're here with Jamie White. He's got man of many talents and he's got a lot of stuff going on for him. Don't even know where to start introducing him. So do you want to just give us a brief run through?
interesting. That's how I always do it. I always ask people to introduce themselves because I think it's always challenging when you're sitting in front of somebody and you're saying, well, this is what they've done and this is what they've done. But where do I start? I'm just off the back of hosting an event for startup entrepreneurs. So the kind of people that have a business idea but don't really know how to realize it, or have started off in business but don't really know what the hell they've gotten themselves into. And that was last Saturday. That was brilliant. That was really, really fun. And that's kind of...
fair play. The Start Summit went really well. Even my brother said, excellent event.
Brilliant.
It was just incredible.
No, do you know what? There's an interesting thing I think about business. A lot of people profit through exploiting people, and I think there's probably nothing more shameful than doing that. But on the flip side of that, when you can create a business that complements anybody that comes in contact with it. So for example, say the people working on it get real confidence and do really well financially from it. The people that you're selling to, when they come in contact with it, they do really, really well from it, and they get really good value and really good quality. And anyway, that's exactly what I'm trying to do with fresh resolutions at the start of the year, at the Start Summit now, and I have a third one coming up next year, which is called the Personal Finance Summit, which is literally what it says on the tin. It's a funny thing. We all work so hard to build some money, but we don't really think about how we spend it or how we invest it. And I really want to give people the kind of fundamentals in terms of managing their own personal finances and wealth creation. So yeah, that's what I'm up to at the moment.
It's sweet because even when I was watching something and you said when you dropped out of college, you started the clubbing group. Or you were doing that during your first year of college?
Yeah, that probably pulled me right out of college. But basically, I was in boarding school. I was in Clongowes. And when you're in Clongowes, it's an all boys boarding school, and you get out once a month. So on Saturday nights when all my mates in other schools were going out, I was sitting in watching movies like Old School and American Pie and Road Trip. And so by the time I got to college, I was I had such high expectations about what the social life would be like. And
especially with all these movies, they just give you this false perception of what it actually is.
Well, there was no way I was going to go without that ideal college life that I kind of created in my head. So I very quickly started hosting parties. And the cool thing about the timing was that when I started hosting parties, social media was just really kicking off. Yeah. And so I hosted and promoted the parties through social media. The other promoters in the market weren't quite caught on. They were marketing through posters, through flyers, through texts. And it gave us a competitive edge that allowed us to scale up really fast. And
what did you do? 35 a week?
30 nights a week to 20,000 students every week across Ireland and the UK. It was insane.
That's insane.
Yeah, and it was so much fun. But on the flip side of that, I was so wrapped up in that world that it became very, very hard to sit down in a classroom environment to learn the basics of business when we were on this roller coaster of business. And so I very quickly lost appreciation for my college course. It was commerce in UCD, and I was very quickly out of that and then doubled down in this nightclubbing business.
That's sweet because even the same with me. I'm in Best right now, and it's just you think about it, and when you're sitting in the lectures, you're kind of like, I've already learned this myself.
So I'm going to beg you not to say that, because I basically missed Best by 5 points and was heartbroken.
Oh, no.
Because I always felt that the college experience in Trinity trumped that of UCD.
Yeah, it's because you're in town.
you're in town. There's a greater international mix. For me, I watch on sunny days when you guys are all having drinks in the pav and think, what if?
What if? Yeah. Oh, it's great crack. I'm not gonna lie. Even the networking and stuff. But aside from that, like, you've been on this roller coaster of an entrepreneurial journey, like, and I watched this one video that you had on YouTube, and it was like 5 entrepreneurs that you should know right now.
Yeah.
And it was people like Gary Vee, Richard Branson, Simon Sinek, Tim Ferriss, and one more.
Anthony Robbins, Tim Ferriss, Simon Sinek,
Tony Robbins. There we go.
Yeah. And
who's your favorite out of the lot? And
it's probably Tony Robbins by a mile. Yeah. And the thing for me is, I have had this kind of roller coaster in business because I jumped straight out of college and went straight into it. And I kind of say a lot of the time that I learned every easy mistake the hard way. Yeah. And I learned them all at my own expense. And I kind of had this moment a little while ago where I was trying to figure out, what am I actually up to here? Like, I'm in business and that's grand, but what can I do for a greater good? Yeah. And I thought, well, why don't I just be really, really transparent and open about my business journey, the lessons I'm learning? Yeah. I am in no way saying, hey, I'm this expert. Here's what you should do and here's what you should do. Actually, what I'm trying to say is, look, this journey is really, really hard. Very few people are actually transparently sharing the lessons they're learning. So it's all the harder to learn because you can't really get experience from others. So how about I just open up, and that's a value add. And I it's amazing it's amazing the experience of that, if I'm honest. Like, I would have thought those 5 guys were really were just followed by so many people, but the amount of mails I got after I published that video from people saying, whoa, this person's really interesting, I've just started following them, are similarly, and some of the most basic things that I share seem to have a really, really strong value, which is lovely.
Even if it reaches a small group of people, but changes their daily life, that's all that matters.
Well, the thing in business is, if you learn one lesson and apply it to your business life, as your business life kind of compounds and year, that one little lesson can have a tremendous value. And for me, what I think is really, really interesting is every day somebody will send me a DM or send me an email and say, hey, I saw this video that you published about such and such. I just want to thank you. I learned a lesson from it, and it's of real value to me. And I know it sounds cringy or cliche that's a massive buzz, but I get a huge buzz from that. It's so nice knowing that blindly you're helping people. You're putting these lessons or these experiences or these tips out there. You're not thinking about who's going to watch them or anything like that. You're just saying, look, these are out there, and then bit by bit they're getting picked up.
That's why it's so good you're sharing the journey. That's a really big, I'd say people notice that and they're grateful for it.
It's kind of funny because sometimes I look in the mirror after posting one of those videos and really want to punch myself hard.
Yeah, it's like, what the fuck did I just say, honestly?
Some of it can be really, really cringy. But it's
what you have to do, honestly.
And it's strange in that oftentimes the cringiest posts that I put up are the ones that actually have the highest impact. So yeah, I wanted to do something. I wanted to do something whilst I'm pushing myself in business, that I suppose serves a greater good. And I felt, if I volunteered at our local soup kitchen, if I did something charitable along those lines, I could do that. But I felt this was a greater good, and a higher value that I could serve.
Yeah. And even at the Start Summit, Pat Falvey, he had this, his speech was just the most energetic thing ever. And he had this one thing he said, it's like, minds are like parachutes. Unless they're open, they don't work. And when you think of that, it's just so true, because you have to be open-minded in order to be able to embrace change and stuff. And all the stuff that you learn from all these entrepreneurs, you should actually take it, trial it a little bit, and see if it works for you, I feel.
Yeah, so like for me, I think it's interesting because there's a lot of people that would think they are themselves when they're not. Yeah. They're what their parents want them to be, they're what their environment wants them to be. And the fact of the matter is, you'll only really build your true self by opening up and experimenting and finding what works for you. What's that great quote? No one can be a better you than you.
Yeah.
And I think the sad thing is that a lot of people get on in life not realizing actually who it is that they really are. And then there's nothing, I think, more inspiring than actually finding and being your true self. And I think there's a great adventure in that. So yeah, when you're listening to the likes of Pat and he's talking about keeping your mind and your spirit and your heart open, I think ultimately to the end of it's to find yourself and to be your greater self.
Like I'd say most people think that they know who they are until they actually sit down and kind of think about it, because you only realize things about yourself in like the most unexpected moments. Like it's in hardships and stuff you realize who you truly are. And that's the whole thing about, like, I'd say failures in business. You probably noticed this. You probably have a lot more failures than successes, and
big time.
And just through them failures you've kind of realized what you're actually trying to achieve, probably.
Do you know what? It's not that I realize what I'm trying to achieve, but you get in touch with yourself that little bit more. I have this kind of thought about failures, that like if you take every failure one by one, and if you think about them in their own instance, they're horrific. But if you think about failures as a journey, and as a necessary part of progression, because a failure will show up a fault, and it'll show up a fault in a really evident fashion. And if you look at that clearly, you can learn from it, you can grow from it, you can progress. And so on that light, failures are a necessary step towards progression and ultimately success. But it's sad how some people just really, really indulge in, and they really, really let failures almost overcome them.
You have to embrace it.
Embrace it, exactly. But anyway, I'm getting completely lost in that point. But no, I like that. In terms of my adventure into myself, and the big thing that I'm realizing is that when you look at life in a long-term perspective as against a short-term perspective, life becomes so much more freeing. Life becomes so much more complimenting. But if you get stuck in a short term, it becomes very trapping. It becomes very upsetting. And there's great strength I'm taking from that long-term perspective, where when something horrific happens, I don't panic because I need to sort it out in the short term. I take a step back and look at it and learn from it in the long term. It makes everything so much more progressive. Yeah,
it's important not to get too anxious, I'd say, in like these moments where you don't know what's going to happen in the future. You just got to hope for the best. But on a side note, I wanted to say you've had collegetimes.com, teen times, and I'm sure they were huge. I remember when I just first started using Facebook and stuff, that was like one of the most prominent things on my timeline.
Yeah,
it just always popped up. But now you have Leading Social.
Yeah, it's so funny when you bring up college times and teen times, because for what they are now, they're garbage. But when we set them up at first, they were so huge. Cool. And it's so strange.
You just had a YouTube channel? No, I remember.
It's like we had Teen Times had 3.5 million followers on Facebook. It had a weekly reach of 100 million. It was insanely successful. And then looking at it now, it's like a glorified advertisement for makeup. But do you know what was fantastic for me in that whole journey was to set them up, was to go through this whirlwind of ups and downs, and then ultimately part ways with them and sell. And
reaching 100 million people a week, like that must have felt incredible.
Do you know, actually, it was so big at the time that I don't think actually we appreciated it. And we certainly didn't capitalize on it as well as we should. But do you know what?
Back then, like, people didn't really. Social media was only coming about, and people were trying to just figure it out, and it was such a new thing that people were like, "What do we do with this?"
Exactly. So no, like oftentimes a huge amount of the work that we were doing was trying to convince people that people were actually on social media, which is mad because it's just an accepted thing now, but it wasn't 3-4 years ago.
So that's what you're doing now with Leading Social.
So basically, when I promoted all those nightclubs, it was through social media. I actually got into concert promotion, so I did a lot of work with DJs, and that was all through social media. I then set up College Times and Teen Times. It was all through social media. I had a marketing company called called the Student Network, which evolved into Youth Nation. Again, the majority of the work was through social media.
Yeah.
And what happened was I was just getting a lot of people saying, look, we could see all the work you're doing on social media. Could you consult with us with regards to our strategy? Or could you perhaps manage our social media?
Yeah.
And so it's the guts of 3.5, 4 years ago now, we set up Leading Social, which there's lots of social media agencies now. Then there wasn't. And yeah, we'd work with businesses on their social media marketing strategy first. So figuring out, one, does social media actually work for this business?
Yeah.
And then two, how can we work it in the most efficient fashion and that will deliver the highest return on investment?
Yeah.
And then we carry out that strategy in line with the business's kind of goals. So some of it might be just consultancy, and then others is literally hands-on management, and the heart of the business is in hands-on management.
And what sort of brands were you most excited to work with, or is it?
You know, like at the start of the journey, genuinely, I was
just anything really.
Anything was exciting, and I actually get really, really excited by different businesses. So like a building contractor, how can they use social media?
Yeah.
Okay, then an auctioneers, how can they use social media? Of course, we're all familiar with how food brands and clothing brands and everything use social media, but when things went a little bit off course, so some pharmaceuticals or some recruitment agencies, it got really exciting creating different mechanics through social media for it to work for them. But I like now I'm really, really, really happy we work with D&G. D&G are huge. That's cool. We work with Vitit. Vitit are huge. That's cool. Previously, we did all the work for Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street. So
I wanted to ask about that. What is he like?
Interesting. He's do you know what he's like? He's like all people. In that when he's nice, he's really nice, and when he's rough, he's pretty rough.
Yeah.
But is
he bipolar?
It's not that. It's not. I wouldn't say.
Because one of my favorite movies all time is Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
And I just don't imagine what his life is like.
Well, think about it. You know, the more people that know you, the more people are messaging you, the more people are asking you to do things, and there's just people at you all the time.
Yeah.
And that can be quite a push on you. And so you might take things for granted because you're always being offered things, and you might react a little bit over the top sometimes because people are always at you and you're stretched. And it was a really interesting experience working with him. To be honest, for me, like, I think I was 26 when the movie came out, and I got in touch with him and said, look, I want to host you here in Ireland. And we did that, and we did it really quickly, and we did it really well. And afterwards he was like, look, you know, you did all this through social media, how about you manage my social media? And we did a really good deal with them to manage his social media, and that gave me an insight into how a personality like that will make money through their social media. And so you know, when I look at the work that I did together with him, he gave me a huge opportunity. And when I look back on myself, I was probably pretty naive in a lot of areas, and he probably tolerated parts of that naivety.
Yeah.
Well, but yeah, long story short, what's he like? Do you know what? Like, he seems like a really loving guy. Seems like, you know, himself and his wife or his partner, they are really nice together, really, really funny. He's really caring about his kids. From all aspects, he seems like a really, really nice guy.
Yeah, just a normal bloke at the end of the day.
A normal, down-to-earth bloke at the end of the day, and always interested in a deal.
Yeah.
How can we do a deal here? How can we do a deal there? Which is quite exciting, you know, when you...
Do you know how... I remember right after watching Wolf of Wall Street, I kind of got into him. And you know what... Like, he still owes money to the government, doesn't he? Like, some ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah, I don't know. So when I had hosted him, that came up, and he said he had committed to making repayments on those amounts.
Yeah.
I actually don't know enough, to be honest. Yeah, so I don't.
It's kind of, I guess it's kind of like just overlooked in a sense.
No, it's not. It's, geez, like, to be honest, every interview we had. So when you bring somebody over, you'll do a media round with them. So you'll introduce them to journalists, and you'll set up interviews because you want it to reach every radio station, every news station, everything. And to be honest, I literally sat on the other line, so there'd be conference calls with them, and every journalist would be like, so about that 100 million you owe to the state, and about this and about that. And honestly, it's not really covered up. It comes up in every single interview.
It came up in this.
Yeah, no. And I actually, you do kind of feel...
You feel sorry for the dude.
Yeah, I don't want to say pity. That's completely wrong. But you certainly see why frustration would come out. And for him, he just said, look, I'm not having another one of these interviews, and put down the phone. And of course, why would somebody want to have the same interview 10 times over, which is effectively what I saw happening. Wow, this is like a whole defensive spirit on Jordan Belfort. I didn't think we'd be talking about this.
Yeah, because, like, obviously, he was a fraud and all that, but I'd look at him as a mastermind if you think about it. Like, he did really do something incredible with what he was given, really.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt what he did was outstanding.
Yeah.
Now, it could be outstandingly negative. Some areas could be outstandingly positive. Yeah. I think he certainly let down a lot of people and messed around a lot of other people. But there's business brilliance as well. It's just however it's applied. And there is a lot to learn. And what I think is pretty cool about him is he has opened up pretty transparently. He has, like, in those books of his, he's pretty open. And now the bulk of his work is in business training. I think that's interesting.
I'd say he's probably incredible at that business training, from the experience he's had, from what he's built in like such a small amount of time. And if you think about it, it's almost like a formula.
Well, I remember when we hosted him. So I hosted him 1 year, and then a company came back and hosted him the second year. And if I'm honest, when I hosted him, I was a little bit underwhelmed in terms of how he taught in front of 3,000 people. Now, the following year, company brought him back, and I was gobsmacked in terms of just the progression, looking at how he was, looking at how he was communicating and engaging with the crowd a year on, and actually how much more people were taking from it a year on. It's an interesting thing. Like, what I found when I started doing YouTube videos is, as I did them, I noticed almost immediately the difference between what I thought I was saying and what I was actually saying. And I still get frustrated when I record a video because I'm like, no, it sounded different in my head. I struggle to communicate in a simple fashion the points that I have in a shareable fashion with others, where they'll really get it. And that's a skill you have to master. So
you have to know what sort of level your viewers are at and how they're going to take in all this information.
Like if you think about a teacher in a classroom, he needs to teach it in a way that everybody within that classroom will get. If you're trying to share points or messages online to an audience you can't see, you have to really, really simplify things down as much as possible and make them as clear and simple as possible. And as I said, a year on, it was really, really interesting seeing how he'd progressed and seeing the impact he could bring.
How he improved himself, I'd say.
Big time.
But on another note, I wanted to mention one quote that you mentioned in one of your videos, which was by Pablo Picasso, and it's good artists steal, good artists copy, great artists steal. And I remember we did a little video on it where we discussed the whole what's it called? Not the remix manifesto, it's like not parodies. I forgot exactly what it is, but it's the whole thing where you look at someone's work and then you take it and you don't steal it, but you make it better in a sense, if you get me.
Yeah.
And that whole thing, and it's a quote that got me thinking, if I'll be honest, and it's relative in society nowadays because so much things are being copyrighted, and it's hard to make it better. Because if you think about all the painters in the Renaissance and stuff like that, how they got better was they learned from each other, all these techniques and all this stuff now. And now, if you look at all these companies and stuff in society, you'd almost say that because there's so much of everything now, everything is so diluted, you could almost say that everyone's copying each other. But some people are doing it better than others, if you get me.
Okay.
So what do you think on that whole
space?
It's like competition and just people competing with each other doing almost the same thing but better.
Look, competition is really, really important. And yeah, like I always think it's interesting when you look at a lot of younger entrepreneurs, right? Because a lot of the younger entrepreneurs will be very, very very, very ambitious for their entrepreneurial careers, and they'll want originality, and they'll want extraordinary, and they set their standards extraordinarily high. And what oftentimes happens is business is really, really challenging, and when you set your challenges within business really high, it becomes all the more challenging. And a lot of them end up kind of doing badly off the back of it in their first instance. What you often see a lot of more seasoned entrepreneurs doing is looking at the market, seeing opportunities, seeing what other people are doing.
Yeah.
And I suppose when you're detached and you're looking at things from a different perspective, you can see perhaps the 1 degree of change that's all the difference between success and failure.
Yeah.
And oftentimes a lot of these very experienced entrepreneurs are looking at something that they've seen previously, they're refining it slightly, and then they're republishing as their own. And the fact of the matter is, it is their own because they've introduced that 1 degree of change. But it brings upon them a much, much easier success and a much greater chance of success, because in effect they're letting somebody do all the market research and the market testing and the product building. They're letting somebody go to all that work and all that expense, and once they've got a kind of a concept up and running, they might be like, sometimes the very person that's built something up might be broke or might be broken by the time they come to market. And no matter how good it is, it's not going to work because they're broke or broken, and somebody else can come along, pick it up for next to nothing, and champion it there going forward. So it's just, the market is the market.
I'd say
is the market.
Even in terms of young entrepreneurs, I'd say that 1% is almost social media. Because if you want to start something and you know social media, how to use social media, how to promote stuff on social media, usually it's how you promote yourself. But if you can apply that to what you're trying to set up, I'd say that's the 1% that could almost be on the side of the success.
Yeah, like, look, I very purposely built up a social media marketing agency because I felt... how are you getting on?
I think the cameras...
No.
Cameras are still going, yeah.
I very purposely built up a social media marketing agency because I felt it had this massive contributing factor to success for businesses. And I felt that perhaps whatever I might do following would greatly benefit from having that in-house expertise. Social media provides businesses, the right businesses, an absolute cutting edge over and above their competitors. It can be really fantastic for people. Yeah,
and especially if you figure it out, I feel. That's why marketing is mainly done on social media now, if you think about it. That's how you can just reach millions of people like you did with college times. So if you would have had that capitalism, like you said, not the capitalistic edge, it would have just
done extraordinarily well.
It would have done
major
bits.
It's frustrating as I look back on what I had. In effect, I had a business that entertained 20,000 people every week in events. Reached 100 million people weekly through our online platforms.
That's like population of... I can't say. I think of a country that has a population. That's just a huge number of people. 100 million a week.
And then we were building up a marketing agency to help businesses connect with that audience, which was all within the 14 to 24-year-old elusive age bracket that other businesses really struggle with. So it is frustrating looking back at that and saying, God, you know what, if we were that little bit more commercially minded, we would have done extraordinarily well. We would have, but there's you know, in not realizing that there's huge lessons, and hopefully they'll stand to me down the line.
Sweet. Anyway, we'll take a break now, and we'll be back.
Cool.
So we're back. What I wanted to ask was, where did your entrepreneurial flair come from? Where did it all begin for you?
Yeah, I actually don't really know. Like in some other interviews, I talk about running a tuck shop in boarding school. If I think back a little bit before that, I remember in like primary school in 5th and 6th class, I was the one that organised the reunions after Irish college and that kind of thing. I don't know. Like I've never really written out a business plan. I've always just enjoyed the excitement of whatever it is that I was doing. So I was the one that organised the reunion after Irish college, and we all went to a movie, and I got everybody to chip in, and I probably maybe made a little bit of cash off that, and I was like, woohoo, that was kind of cool. And I didn't think that was business. I just thought that was great. And then in school, when I set up the tuck shop or was selling all sorts of stuff, I didn't think, oh, this is some masterful business that I'm building up. I just thought this is fun. And then even as that evolved into the nights, I didn't think, oh, this is mad. I just thought this is cool. The money on top. Of course, beforehand I thought, geez, if this goes well, I'm gonna have loads of money. But it was more kind of the excitement of around it all that really kind of it got me going. And then just what happened was literally one thing led to the next, and before I knew it,
you're here doing leading social.
Before I knew it, kind of 10 years on, and I've had this up down journey.
Yeah, basically. That's what I even saw you posted on your Instagram or LinkedIn.
Journey of an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it was just the zigzag, really.
It's brilliant the way everybody, so many people have connected with that. I feel really bad. I'm about to sneeze, and I'd say you like blow your ears off. But it's just been really interesting in that. Like it's strange. I'm 31. The kind of average age that somebody gets into business is 35. The average age of a successful entrepreneur is 45. I'm 31 and I've had the guts of about 15 years experience in business, which is weird. Most people don't get that till they're 50. So it's nice to have all that experience. But kind of as much as I've said, I didn't have a business plan, and I've really suffered the consequences of that. And now for where I'm at, I'm really trying to think, okay, how do I capitalize on all this experience I've had? How do I capitalize on this network that I've built? How can I do myself justice? Yeah,
but even more than all that capitalization, you're almost giving back to society with all these events that you're hosting. Like, they're actually incredible.
Thank you.
Because if you think about it, all these people that go there, like when we went there, what I noticed was everyone there was trying to figure something out in their business or in their life or whatever they were doing. And everyone was their attention they had to the speakers and to the event. Like even my brother said, one of the guys who did the meditation.
Yeah. John Francis Leader.
What's his name?
John Francis Leader,
yeah. He said that he talked about all these things that you shouldn't let your mind cloud your future or something. I don't know exactly. I was talking to him last night about it, but he was saying, oh shit, I lost it completely.
No, don't worry. What he was talking about is that so many people actually they think they are themselves. Okay, but a lot of people, like I talk to a lot of gym trainers, and they'd say, you know what's interesting? The amount of people who don't own over their bodies own them.
Yes, that's what it was. Yeah.
And he was talking about the amount of people that don't own their minds own them. So when they want to do something, their mind is like, do you really want to do that? Like, let's be honest here, you're going to stumble, you're going to fuck up. And instead, what he's saying is you actually have to work on your body to get it to complement whatever it is that you want to do with yourself. And you have to work on your mind similarly to get it to complement whatever it is that you want to do. So when you next go, oh, I'm going to do a talk or I'm going to do a podcast, your mind is, yeah, you're going to do that podcast, and you're going to show everybody how bloody good you are. You're a beast, you're an animal, you're this, you're that. And your mind needs to complement whatever it is that you want to do. So when I asked John Francis Leader to start the event, I really wanted it to start with a look inside, because so many people get distracted with a good idea or an exciting partnership, but they don't realize the very first thing that they have to work with is themselves. So whatever about being successful professionally, you have to first be personally successful. When you're on top of yourself, success professionally just comes as a byproduct. It's almost like it magnetizes opportunities. And on the other side of that, when you aren't successful with yourself, you can be on top of a huge company and crumble it. And you can be on top of a fantastic relationship and crumble it. So above all else, people get distracted with their ideas and extracted with the excitement about getting into business, when in actual fact they should get excited about looking into themselves and getting up on top of themselves, whether that's their body or whether that's their mind or whatever else they can find with it when they do look inside. It's fantastic.
But that's what we said at the start, really, is the goal at the end is just finding your true self.
Exactly.
Coming to terms with who you really are. And another thing that I realized, I noticed a lot, is consistency. Consistency is such a key element to entrepreneurship. Like, same with the podcast. Like, one thing that we kind of noticed was, unless we do them consistently, it'll all crumble. And if you get into that mentality that, oh, I'm gonna have something done for this week, you become so much more organized. You enjoy it so much more. You know what's coming up. You know what you have to do. And I'd say that's the same with overcoming failures as well. If you're consistent, even if you have the zigzag, like we were saying, consistency will get you through the hardships. And
you touched on my liking to Anthony Robbins. He has this fantastic book called Unshakable, and it's all about investing, and it's all about investing in low cost indices funds, and just like consistent contributions and consistent commitment to those funds year in, year out trumps anyone buying, selling, shifting, moving over and over and over. Warren Buffett's money sorry. There's interviews with Warren Buffett where he talks about what he'll do with his money, and he says he'll put it all into low cost indices funds and leave it there and not touch it, because that will outperform so many of the traders. It's really interesting. So in finance and investment, you'll see consistency and commitment trump out. And again, in business, people will get distracted by the failures. People will get distracted by the downs, not realizing that oftentimes they're a necessary part of the journey to get you to wherever it is that you want to go.
But even, I'd say, it's as dangerous getting distracted by the failure as it is getting distracted by success. Because if you get too ahead of yourself, I feel that's the thing. When you're out of touch with your mind, that can kind of blow out of proportion, if you know.
Look, when you're like at the end of the day, if you're out of touch with yourself, just
won't really work.
Everything goes all over the place from there. You're the start of everything. So if you're out of touch with yourself, you won't appreciate people that you love, and you'll push them away. You won't look after yourself. If you're out of touch with yourself, oftentimes you'll be in a self-destruct. Whereas if you're in touch with yourself, I think everything starts to complement and compound from there, and you'll just do better and better and better and better.
And what would you say are some of the better ways to get in touch with yourself? What would you like?
Time out. So simple. Time out. So try and, if you want to call it, meditate or whatever you might title it, but just taking time for yourself. So like, what do? I keep a diary every night. Now, it's not, dear diary, I did this. It's, this is how I'm feeling. And this is how I'm feeling about certain decisions I've made, and perhaps could they be better. And one entry, one entry doesn't make sense in itself, but when you have these entries over months, you start to realize, geez, I gave up drink a little while ago, and there's a pattern across all these posts within my diary that they're all much more positive than when I was drinking all the time. You notice, geez, it's really funny, the days that I get up on time and I do yoga and I meditate and I exercise and I do all that, I have much more successful days than the days that I don't. Weird. So you start to see a lot of patterns. So I think a diary is a really interesting thing. But even before that, just scheduling in 10 minutes to literally lie on your back in a dark room, not fall asleep, and actually just see what comes to your head, and try and process that. So like what I would do oftentimes is do that and have an A4 sheet beside me and be like, okay, this is on my mind, this is on my mind, this is on my mind. And it's amazing. As soon as I seem to write it down, it's like
it's like figured out almost.
Well, no, it's not figured out. It's just it stops ringing in my head. Another thing will come up and another thing, until I get to a point where there's nothing left.
And you just have a big A4 sheet of all this shit that you have.
And it's great. Like, so, a lot of times people will build to-do lists, and those to-do lists are built from people screaming at them. But it's very interesting when you build a kind of a personally orientated to-do list. And it's very, very strengthening. So I think, if it's an exercise like that, or if it's a guided meditation, or if it's keeping a diary, I think all of those will help you get in touch with yourself. And I think, as I said, the more and more you're in touch with yourself, the more life starts to make a lot more sense. The less you're in touch with yourself, the more
satisfied, more happiness. Anyways, we're gonna finish up. That was sweet, honestly. That was perfect. Anything you want to like shout out?
No.
Nothing. You're all good.
I'm all good.
All good. All right.
Let me just get a photo of you guys in front of the sign.
I want to get a photo of you as well, but
So we need to get the thumbnail as well. So.
That's perfect. Anyway, this was Jamie White, leading entrepreneur in Irish society. I feel one of the leading ones.
Okay, thank you very much.
I feel like because you're sharing your journey, a lot more people can appreciate you and connect with you. And that's important.
Do you know what I think is so funny when I'm posting, and if I say something authoritative, like you should do this or you should do that, it gets no engagement. But when I post something like I've just been through this and this is what I learned, the difference is like a 4 or 5-fold increase in terms of engagement and reach. So people are interested in following a journey, but people certainly aren't interested in being told what to do. But they'll learn from somebody's journey far quicker than they'll learn from a to-do list. It's interesting.
Anyways,
Uh,
see you next week.